For the longest time, the golf world felt split in two. Not just by tours, not just by money, not just by headlines. It felt split by loyalty, by legacy, by what this game is supposed to mean. And then Rory McIlroy said something that didn't sound loud at first. It didn't sound like a rant. It didn't sound like a war cry. But if you listen closely, it felt like a warning. A real one. The kind of message that doesn't just hit LIV players. It hits fans, tours, and maybe the future of professional golf itself. Because this wasn't Rory simply taking another shot at a rival league. This felt different. More controlled. More confident. Almost like a man looking at the entire landscape of golf and saying, we're about to find out what really matters now. And what makes this so powerful is that his words may have revealed something bigger than frustration. They may have revealed the moment the balance started to shift. So if you think this is just another golf controversy, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you might see Rory's message in a completely different way. And before we go any further, if you truly love golf, if this game means something to you, and if you enjoy stories that go deeper than just scores and headlines, make sure you subscribe and become part of this golf family. Because this channel is for the fans who still feel something when golf gives us moments like this. What made Rory's latest message so important wasn't just the timing. It was the tone. A few years ago, when the LIV split exploded across the sport, Rory was one of the strongest voices pushing back. He stood there and said what a lot of traditional golf fans were already feeling. That something about the whole thing felt off. The money was massive, the format was different, and the game suddenly felt like it was being pulled away from the history that made it matter in the first place. But over time, Rory changed. Not completely. Not in the sense that he suddenly embraced LIV. But he did become more honest about his own role in the fight. He admitted he had probably been too judgmental at times. And that mattered, because it showed growth. It showed maturity. It showed that even in a divided sport, he was willing to look at the situation like a human being, not just a headline machine. BBC Sky Sports. That's why these new comments hit harder. Because now Rory isn't speaking from pure anger. He's speaking from clarity. Reports around LIV's financial future suddenly changed the mood. Questions started growing louder. Could the league continue in the same way? Would players look for a path back? Would the power dynamic in golf shift again? Rory looked at that moment and basically said, if players can come back and make the main tour stronger, that's just smart business. But then he added the line that changed everything. If you want to be the most competitive golfer you can be, this is where you should want to play. And if you don't want that, then maybe that says something AP/WRL BBC. Now stop right there. Because that wasn't just a comment. That was a challenge. And here's the part nobody talks about. Rory didn't just question where players play. He questioned what they value. That is why this landed so hard with golf fans. For years, the debate around LIV has been framed around contracts, fines, lawsuits, rankings, and negotiations. But Rory cut through all of that and dragged the conversation back to something much more uncomfortable. Competitiveness. Hunger. Identity. In other words, what kind of golfer do you actually want to be? That's a brutal question in this era. Because money can answer a lot of problems. It can change schedules. It can create new teams. It can build leagues. But it cannot fully answer legacy. It cannot fully answer what fans feel when the best players are all in the same event, under pressure, trying to beat each other with nowhere to hide. And that's where Rory's warning becomes bigger than LIV itself. He wasn't just talking to the stars who left. He was talking to everyone watching. He was reminding the golf world that competition is still the soul of this sport. Not branding. Not spin. Not side stories. Competition. Wait till you hear what happened next in the conversation around this. Because once Rory said that, the question stopped being, should LIV players be allowed back? The real question became, if they do come back, what does that tell us? Think about it. If a player fights to return to the PGA Tour or strengthen a path through the DP World Tour, fans won't just see a paperwork move. They'll see an admission. Maybe a quiet one, but an admission all the same. That when the dust settles, when the contracts become less certain, when the future gets a little blurry, the place that still defines elite weekly competition matters. And that's exactly why his words felt like a warning to LIV. Not because he said the league would disappear tomorrow. He didn't. In fact, he acknowledged they'll try to find new investment and keep going in some form. But he also said that when even one of the richest backers in the world decides something is too expensive, that says a lot. Again, Rory wasn't yelling. He was pointing, calmly, directly, and that almost makes it hit even harder. Sky Sports AP/WRAL. And this is where everything changed. Because for a long time, Rory was painted as the emotional face of resistance, the traditionalist, the guy carrying the torch for the old order. But now, he sounds more like the guy who sees what the endgame could be. He's no longer only defending the past. He's defining the standard. That's a very different role. And from a fan perspective, that matters more than people realize. Because whether you love Rory or not, whether you agree with every word he says or not, he is speaking to something golf fans deeply understand. The best version of golf is when greatness has to prove itself against greatness, again and again, in the open. That's what fans miss when the sport is fragmented. They miss the pressure of stacked leaderboards. They miss the feeling that every win means more because everybody is there. They miss the arguments ending on the course instead of on social media. Rory's message tapped directly into that feeling. But here's the twist that makes this even more compelling. He didn't slam the door. He actually left it open. That's the fascinating part of all this. Rory didn't say, keep them out forever. He didn't demand revenge. He didn't act bitter. He said if players coming back makes the tour stronger, people should be open to it. That's not weakness. That's not inconsistency. That's evolution. And honestly, that may be why his warning carries more power now than it would have a few years ago. Back then, critics could say he was emotional, defensive, too close to the fight. Now he sounds like someone who has moved through the anger and come out more certain on the other side. That's dangerous for LIV in a completely different way. Because when your strongest critic becomes more measured, more fair, and still ends up saying the top competitive standard lives somewhere else, people listen differently. And yes, there are still huge complications. Contracts, pathways, politics, pride, players who may not want to come back. Bryson himself has openly talked about simply playing the events that want him if LIV doesn't last in its current form. Brooks has already used a temporary return path. Rahm has worked to keep doors open in Europe. None of this is simple, and nobody should pretend it is Sky Sports BBC. But that complexity is exactly why Rory's words mattered. He simplified the emotional truth of the moment. He made it less about legal structures and more about competitive intention. Less about what golf can pay you, more about what golf asks from you. And if you're a real golf fan, that hits home. Because this sport has always asked for something deeper. Patience, humility, nerve, honesty. It asks you to stand there with everything on the line and hit the shot anyway. That's why golf fans respect courage so much. Not fake drama, not marketing drama, real pressure. Rory's warning felt like it came from that place. Not a boardroom, not a press strategy. From the heart of a player who still believes the hardest road means the most. And maybe that's why this story feels bigger than one quote. It feels like a turning point. Maybe not the final turning point. Maybe not the moment everything gets fixed. But a turning point in how the argument is framed from here forward. Because once you move the conversation from money to meaning, from leverage to legacy, from contracts to competitiveness, you're suddenly talking about the very soul of pro golf. And LIV can answer a lot of questions. But that one is harder. Because if elite players truly believe the toughest, most meaningful week-to-week test still lives on the traditional tours, then every future decision gets seen through that lens. And if they don't believe that, then Rory's warning still hangs there. What does that say? That is why stories like this matter. Not because golf needs more division, but because golf means more when people still care enough to fight for what the game should be. Rory McIlroy's warning may not have ended the debate, but it may have changed the way fans hear it. And in a sport built on legacy, pressure, and truth under pressure, that matters more than ever. So now I want to ask you, do you think Rory was right? Is the PGA Tour still the ultimate test in golf, or has the game changed for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more golf stories with real emotion, real stakes, and real respect for the game, stay with this channel. Because if you love golf, you already know these moments are about more than headlines.